Dr. McClintic is a successful, ambitious, gracious, and inspirational hard of hearing community member. She has lived this journey every step of the way from the very beginning and will see it through to the very end. She has risen to the unexpected challenges of life as a hard of hearing individual and has persevered. She has learned that there is simply no other option but to prevail. Nothing is worth losing to a disability. In fact, disability, if planted right, can become the seed that will grow your potential. Who plants that seed? And more importantly, who waters it? Everyone needs their person, their hero. Today, she will talk to us about her hero, what makes her wake up each morning with the drive and desire to conquer what the world throws at her, who helps her get through the days, hours, and minutes as a person with a significant disadvantage in life. Heroes are always among us, but they are also deep within us. Dr. Jamie McClintic will find and fuel what we as parents need to help our children succeed. Come and hear her secret, what gives her strength to face each day. Hear who is the hero within her, and learn how to become the hero within your child.
It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Jamie McClintic. I would like to share with you a part of the video that first introduced me to Jamie. It's from a series called Changing the Face of Beauty, which is an organization that encourages the integration of people with disabilities into the advertising and media. We'll play that for you today.
My name is Dr. Jamie McClintic. I'm an occupational therapist, and I am changing the face of beauty. I first noticed that I didn't relate to most marketing messages as a young preteen age. When I was growing up, the only place I saw anybody with other hearing aids was the audiologist. You never saw it in a billboard, in a magazine, in photographs, on makeup commercials. It wasn't around. It didn't make sense why I couldn't be like everybody else, why everybody else didn't want to be like me. The lack of inclusion has been pretty detrimental on my life and basically changed where I'm at today. There have been many, many experiences throughout my life where people are not kind to me, and it started, when you're 7, 8, and 9, testing my limitations and my disability, and why do other people think that's fun or funny? All people are different, and that is okay. One of the situations that I had finished off a job interview, and I had gotten hired. It was a wonderful, great job interview, and my soon-to-be boss says to me, you know, when you do come to work on your first day, you're going to have to take that tongue ring out. And I explained to him that I have a severe hearing loss, and I have worked a lifetime on getting my speech and my ability, my articulation down pat. And immediately he changed his tone, and he starts talking to me very slowly and very loudly as I couldn't comprehend the conversation. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, we just had a 30-minute interview that went well because you didn't know that I had a disability. It doesn't put you in a good place. And you're trying to prove yourself to other people, prove that you're capable, prove that you can hear, that you can keep up with the pace of society. If I could see more advertisements of the people wearing hearing aids, it would become a norm, and we would know that people wearing hearing aids are smart and capable and just as good as everybody else. Those feelings of isolation, depression, resentment, and anger would disappear. In order to change the face of beauty, I am a voice. In that, I hope that others can take what I have to say, learn from my personal experiences, and share that. And that's where we need to count on that education with advertising and media, to keep putting ourselves out there, keep reminding people that it's okay. It's okay to be different. If they want to gain money from the largest minority in the world, you need to cast people with disabilities. A company that includes people with disabilities is going to have my vote. I am going to support them. Companies like Nordstrom, who are stepping out of their comfort zone and including plus-size models, including models with disabilities, are opening the doors to our family, our community, and we're going to back them 100%. Changing the face of beauty has the potential to educate those people and to include people with disabilities in advertising and media, to normalize this. If we get that word out there, and if we can tap into the advertising and media, the results are extremely powerful. I am changing the face of beauty. Are you?
We tracked Jamie down to learn that she is a native of Michigan and has worked as a pediatric occupational therapist for schools in northern Michigan since 2002. She was diagnosed with a profound hearing loss at the age of 3 and currently wears bilateral hearing aids. Jamie chases 2 active children, including 1 daughter with special needs, and enjoys coaching in her spare time. Since obtaining her doctorate, Jamie has worked as an adjunct professor for 2 statewide universities. She is active in her community and serves on several committees that improve the quality of life for people with disabilities. Jamie has honorably accepted our invitation to present today and share her secrets to success with us. So please welcome Dr. Jamie McClintic.
Good morning, everyone. Wow, you found me. I have been a very secretive turtle hiding in my shell for 39 years. My name is Dr. Jamie McClintic. I am a daughter, wife, a mom, a pediatric occupational therapist, and have a bilateral profound hearing loss. I wear 2 high-powered hearing aids. And I come to you today to share a little bit about my story. My path to this destination has been atypical, as I have immersed myself into the world of being a hearing individual. My story is not your story. I'm going to ask that you laugh with me today, cry with me today, but please do not compare my story to your story. Every one of your stories are all different, yet equally inspiring and amazing. When I was asked to open up today, I enthusiastically agreed. I knew I was a wealth of information and could be an inspiration to all of you, providing countless pieces of advice. However, it wasn't until I sat down to put pen to paper that I froze. I'm a great talker. I always have something to say, and I always have an opinion. Why was this incredibly hard for me? Talking about myself was the obstacle. Talking to all of you for 1 hour about me was really hard to comprehend. I felt that I wasn't anyone special. In fact, I didn't even know that I had a story to tell. You see, all I ever wanted was a normal, easy life, and there wasn't a breathing, living moment where I wanted otherwise. And then something happened. In April of 2009, I found out I was pregnant with a beautiful baby girl. Not only did I have new mom worries about morning sickness, where my water was going to break, or how bad labor was going to hurt. How something the size of a watermelon was going to fit out of something the size of a lemon. But I also wondered what life was going to be like as a hard of hearing parent, because this was the first real time in my life that my hearing loss might actually impact someone else. How was I going to hear this new baby cry at night when I was sleeping or in the shower or while my husband was at work? It was also the first time in my life that I felt I had a disability, a disadvantage. So I made my first ever appointment at an adaptive equipment store down in southern Michigan that sold various deaf and hard of hearing supplies. These tools were going to light up and flash and alert me and help me when the baby cried. I ended up walking out of the store that day with nothing except for the decision to use my husband's really good working ears to help me out. But these were the types of things spiraling through my mind prior to the birth of my daughter. I knew we'd figure it out. We had to. And that soon we would just put this temporary disadvantage behind me. You see, that's how I viewed my disability prior to the birth of my daughter. That this was just a small hurdle that interfered occasionally with how I wanted to live my life. I truly didn't have a clue how much this disability owned me, ruled me, and created the person that I was becoming. I didn't realize that every single day of my life was a battle to survive against myself. I didn't know these things because they were simply a part of life. It wasn't until I gave birth to my daughter that I made these observations and realized that I have a story to tell. A story that had stayed hidden, very hidden for over 30 years. So rewind to July of 2009. Here I am in the elevator. I'm a very nervous mommy-to-be. The doctors asked my husband and I if we wanted to test for any genetic disorders. And we talked about it, and we agreed because I was the type of person who needed to be very well prepared in the event that anything should go wrong. I mean, I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I needed to look cool, calm, and collected, and very knowledgeable about what was coming my way. So we had those tests done, and they were sent off, and we waited, and we waited. A few more weeks went by, and it turns out those tests were sent to the wrong hospital. We never got those results, and by the time we realized it, I was headed into the last trimester, and the baby was doing well. She was passing all of her tests and ultrasounds and stress tests, so there was no need to continue to pursue that. So off we went, and it was about December. We were downstate in southern Michigan, and we were on our very last trip. We had spent Christmas with our family. We had picked up the last few things for our baby, and we were headed on our way back up to northern Michigan to try to ride out the last couple months of this pregnancy with no issues, right? So we head into the very first town off the interstate, and there was an elderly gal who decided that it would be a great time on a Sunday afternoon to go buy some new light bulb for her chandelier. She made a right-hand turn right in front of Scott and I and crash. We were in a low-speed automobile accident that day. And on our way further north, after we had taken care of the police report, I called my girlfriend to let her know what happened. And she says, no, you need to go right in and get checked out. So we got back to our town, and I checked into the hospital, and before I knew it, I was being wheeled away in a chair and admitted, and pretty soon a nurse comes in to tell me I am in labor. So they gave me some vaccinations and medication to stop labor. They also gave some injections to the baby to help strengthen her lungs. And from there, every few days, every 2 days, I went into the hospital for fetal stress tests, ultrasound, monitoring. So there she is. There were so many opportunities to catch this and prepare us for what was coming. But on January 5th, 2010, I gave birth at 12:02 in the afternoon to my first child, a beautiful baby girl. It only took a few seconds for me to realize that she was born with Down syndrome. I looked right at her ear. You can see in my face, I am so scared. I knew something was wrong. People were running around taking photos. If I could have gotten up, I would have grabbed all of those phones and flipped them closed. I knew something wasn't right. She didn't look right to me. So when I handed her off to my husband for the first time, I didn't even look at our baby. I stared deep into his eyes, wondering if he saw what I saw in that very moment. He didn't see anything. He saw a beautiful little girl, his daughter. A little while later, my husband's best friend showed up. He's a firefighter, paramedic. He's very knowledgeable. And I look into his eyes, not at our baby. I'm searching for validation from anyone that they saw what I saw that day. And nobody, not even my mom. Now my mom, my goodness, booked a $1,000 plane ticket the night before to make it on time for the birth of this baby. And guess what? She showed up 40 minutes later. And when I handed her off to my mom, I stared right into my mom's eyes, wondering if she saw what I saw. My mom saw nothing that day except for a beautiful little granddaughter. And as I was searching for validation, someone finally helped me out. The doctor. He came in and he sat on the bed. Doctors do not sit on the bed unless they are about to deliver bad news. And you can see in my face, he was validating my biggest fear. I knew what was coming. And as he started to deliver the news, my world started to tumble. Until it hit rock bottom. And when your world smashes to the ground like an unexpected ton of bricks, who is there to pick me up? None other than my mom. And my mom, she sat with me for hours that day and that night as we grieved what was happening. We both had our fingernails painted pink, and we grieved the loss of the little girl that I was supposed to have that day. The realization of this disability created not only devastation for myself at the loss of the little girl I was meant to have, but I was also devastated for the little girl herself. And it all came flooding back to me why I was so sad for her. She would now have to endure a life similar to the secret I had kept hidden all of these years. A secretive, isolating life, otherwise known as an individual with a disability. And when you as a parent learn that your child will now have to endure life with this title, you go through various stages of grief, starting with shock, denial, anger, bargaining, why me? It brings back a lot of emotion, right? I understand where you all are. And it's okay, whatever you're feeling, whatever stage of grief, all the way into acceptance, hear me now. I understand, and it is okay. Because your job, by far, is the most difficult one of all. Being a caretaker, a parent, grandparent, aunt or uncle of someone who has a disability is stressful. It's never ending. You're full of grief, self-doubt, fear. You need to do all the research, be the best advocate you can be, all while appearing strong. You need to be their parent and sometimes their best friend. And everybody's got their eye on you, watching how you handle situations. So this is one of my favorite images of what parenting a child with a disability feels like. So here I am, floating atop the water, without a care in the world, cool, calm, and collected, with sunshine on my face. I look completely put together, but underneath, my feet are paddling like heck to stay afloat. I flop, and I flounder, and I paddle on some days. And at the very bottom, the deeper the water gets, the darker it gets. And the colder and lonelier it becomes. And there are days that we feel like that. And many times I compare our job as a parent of a child with a special need to kind of like a coal miner's job. You are the most important part of this coal mining job because you cannot create or find or mold this beautiful diamond without you. Without strong, unwavering caretakers, success stories like this, like me, will not happen. So by being here today, we want you to walk away with the tools. We want you to be in that coal mine, not scraping with your fingernails, but I want you to have your axes swung over your shoulder, marching in a row like the seven dwarfs, singing hi-ho! Because this, me, standing before you today, was a moment that my parents never knew or dreamt was possible. They didn't have the tools as they were raising me, and we want to give you those tools today. This moment would not have been possible had they listened to those around them. Disability is a multi-dimensional word that takes on about 30 different adjectives. When we describe an individual who has a disability, we might consider them lonely. Or is that what makes them independent? And sometimes we are viewed as weak. But is that what really makes us strong? Sometimes we want to quit. But is that moment the moment that turns us into champions? Regardless if the disability lies within you or someone you love, this word creates so much added chaos to our lives. And it wasn't until the birth of my daughter that I realized how shameful, difficult, and hidden disabilities are for both the person experiencing it and for the caretakers, you and I. So I made a commitment on the eve of January 5th, 2010, the night that Maddox was born, that my daughter would not have to travel this same isolating path, that I would work endlessly day in and day out to make her feel successful at school, to never be teased by peers, and to stand eye to eye with the majority of the world who will, within seconds, jump to stereotype her based on physical characteristics. I wanted to take words like lonely, quitters, and weak and eliminate them from our vocabulary. And I needed to do this with inclusion and acceptance. Two very wishful words, right? I wanted to create a strong, independent champion. That's when I found a company called Changing the Face of Beauty a few years back. So there's Katie. She was a well-established photographer from the Chicago area who had actually had 5 boys and had just given birth to little Grace within a few weeks of me having Maddox. When she discovered her daughter had a disability, she started to recognize that people with disabilities were not featured or promoted in advertising and media. So she started using her skills to make sure that people of all abilities were featured. She believed that the more that we confronted disability and educated the public, the better impact that we would have, and the more of a chance that we would have at society becoming more accepting. I believed in her mission, and so we connected. And this past June, I traveled by train with a friend of mine to Chicago to tell Maddox's story, to tell what it's like raising a child with disabilities, what it feels like to advocate and protect our children. And that day, I told that story, and I nailed that story. And then in September, she wrote to let me know that our little mini movie was going to debut on social media. So I signed out of work and I ran into my car and I sat nervously as it loaded on my little 4-inch phone. And as the credits started to roll, I remember feeling confused and disappointed. It wasn't Maddox's story. She had hardly got any screen time at all. I called my parents and I explained and I had them watch it and they said, yeah, you're right. And when they had asked me questions, they had thrown in a couple about me, but my goal was Maddox. That's what we were there for. So I humbly answered their questions and kind of steered them right back to focus on Maddox. And that evening rolled around and I connected with Katie and alluded to the fact that Maddox didn't really get much screen time in the Changing the Face of Beauty couch series. And she laughed at me. She said, well, when we were in the editing process and we watched, we realized there wasn't one story. There were two stories. Maddox's story and your story. And because of Changing the Face of Beauty, my story was told. My story. I didn't even realize that I had a story. I was simply me, plugging away at life, managing the constant struggles and obstacles as a hard of hearing person. But because of the isolating nature behind our disability, I couldn't even comprehend that there were thousands of other people who could relate to my feelings. And that's part of the reason we're here today. We want to take words like lonely, quitters, and weakness and turn them into words like strong, independent, champion. By learning how to create opportunities, network with each other, give the kids opportunities to connect with other kids just like them, and even meet adults who have traveled our same path. Our goal is to give you the tools and confidence that my parents did not have access to. So let's rewind 39 years to July 23rd, 1978. That was the day my parents first met me. For 3 years into my toddlerhood, they had cradled and loved their perfect, beautiful little girl. They had spent days and nights staring at my little hands and toes and dreaming of my future.
Who will she marry? What will she be when she grows up?
Everything was perfectly normal and falling into place for my parents. They had a brilliantly smart son and a witty, adorable daughter. My father had this mega career that allowed my mom to stay home with my brother and I. See, they lived in Nebraska, and his career took him away from family and brought him to Michigan. And so as they were raising my brother and I, they didn't have their parents around to help them, guide them, and teach them what to look for in all of our milestones. They were young and inexperienced and really thought as a toddler that my behavior was a result of the terrible twos. At one point, they tell me that I was biting my cousin's arm, and they were yelling at me, "Stop, stop," and I didn't stop. They thought some days I was just stubborn and terrible because I never listened to them. I think, though, that this stubbornness continued until I went to college. but never in a million years did they think it was because I couldn't hear them. In 1981, they took me to my 3-year-old well baby check and informally mentioned to the doctor about my lack of speech development. So here I am as a young toddler. My parents had me sitting down. You see, if they let me walk, I would have been swimming way out there with that duck. But at that well baby appointment, the doctor did some simple testing that day, like clapping and talking when I wasn't looking at him. And then he turned to my parents. That's the moment, right? The moment we never forget. And he said to them, "This child cannot hear." My parents experienced that day what everyone in this room has experienced, including me. The crushing feelings that invade your mind and soul when news like this is unexpectedly slapped upon you. The doctor referred us to Michigan State University. Michigan State University, you guys, that was 1981. Here I am standing in Lansing, Michigan, just a few short miles away from the very same office that confirmed my diagnosis 36 years ago. What was one of the darkest moments in my life's history has now become one of the very brightest. The audiology office was located in the basement at the university. It was physically dark. There were no windows down there, and it was figuratively dark. It was there that a man by the name of Dr. Michael Stewart, he was a fairly new grad, just starting out his career at the time. He completed my first audiogram. My parents looked on as I sat in that soundproof booth, repeating, as my dad reports to me, thousands of words. In fact, let me tell you about my favorite sound booth memory. So, I have the word list memorized. Hot dog, ice cream cone, baseball. Well, he gets to the word headlight, and I repeat after him, and he puts his head down, and I get a little bit nervous, and he says, "Excuse me for a moment," and he leaves the soundproof booth, and he has a nice exchange with my parents. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, oh, shoot, what did I mess up? And he comes back in, and we resume, and we complete the test. And that afternoon, walking out of the clinic, my parents say to me, "Jamie Suzanne, where in the world did you learn the word Bud Light?" So that was a good laugh. I also, in the basement at Michigan State University, we've been talking a lot about our newborn hearing screens at last night's dinner. And, prior to this time, there was no newborn hearing screen in existence. There was no way to test out whether our little babies were at risk or not. And I actually took part in some of the very first research studies that helped the state of Michigan get their newborn hearing screen. This helped fund my very first pair of hearing aids. But in all seriousness, aside from the Bud Light story, it was after that appointment that Dr. Stewart reported to my parents that I had been diagnosed with a profound hearing loss, one step away from being deaf, that I could hear low tone better than high tone, that I had never heard the S sound or the TH sound, and many others. My parents sat quietly as he explained that I might have been born with it. It could have been caused from a bad ear infection or a really high fever. Nonetheless, they had two goals. One, to get me to be able to hear as quickly as possible. And two, to find out if the hearing loss was changing. Because if it was,
it would change everything.
My mom didn't want to believe the professionals and did what perhaps every parent might do in the beginning. First, she thought I would just get better with time. I went every month. At each follow-up appointment, I would repeat the word and raise my hand at each tone as my parents eagerly looked on. After each set of scores, the results were the same. I was stable and profoundly hard of hearing. My mom and dad were at different phases. My mom would present examples to Dr. Stewart. Jamie heard me at the pool, and she would scrounge for any insight that my hearing was going to get better. Dr. Stewart said, "No, it won't. She is handicapped."
And we get out of the car, and I stop. What's that noise? And looks left. She looks right. And she looks up. I had heard my first ever airplane. She started.
Throughout the next few months, I acclimated to my new aids. I had learned how to put them in. I listened to the rain, the wind, the birds, and my brother's voice for the first time. Being introduced to this new world of sound made me extremely inquisitive and curious. I learned to appreciate the knowledge that comes with hearing. My dad says I was too young to realize it, but he thinks all of this factored into the building of my character, of determination, strength, and willingness to learn. They made every effort in any way of letting me know that I was anything less than perfect.
The line I used time after time, because I wore very thick glasses, was, "Dad doesn't have very good eyes, and you don't have very good ears." I did this to instill in you that not seeing very well or hearing very well was not an obstacle. It's just who we are.
My parents thought it would be best, because I was behind the learning curve, that I got a jump start, so they signed me up to attend a well-known preschool. My parents say I blossomed there, and they knew I would be okay because
You were tough,
Resilient
kind.
and fearless.
Next comes kindergarten. The principal, Dr. Tweedy, was not afraid of mainstreaming me, but he thought it would be best if I attended what they referred to as an all-deaf school, because if my hearing deteriorated, they could pack more knowledge into me before I went completely deaf. There's a kicker, though. This school was in a different state, and my parents refused to send me that far away from them. So they rejected the idea, and they met with school officials a second time, asking that they take me in. Asking that they take me in. Folks, here is the punchline, the line that is drawn in the sand that separates you from failure to success. You have a choice here. You can believe the perceptions of others, or you can create your own vision. And let me tell you, you know your little one the best. You know what is realistic and what is not. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and caretakers, please do not let the voices, judgments, predictions of others shape the lives of the ones that we are here for today. And more importantly, do not ever let this person, your child, hear or feel these assumptions. You are the ultimate protector. As a young child, to hear an adult allude to the idea that you are not wanted, that you are not good enough just one time, is enough to catastrophically damage his or her potential. So guard them with all your heart and willpower from the perceptions of others. Again, this is why the mission behind changing the face of beauty is so very important to me. The more that we can normalize disability, the less inaccurate information is out there, and the more that we can come to terms with what is. And then we can take what is and transform it. Because you can never build a house without the lumber, and you can never drive a car without the engine. And you cannot build an uplifting and accepting community without information, without first being informed, and then accepted, and eventually understood. My parents knew if it didn't work out that they would simply find another school for me. But a few weeks later, the school board finally informed us that I would be accepted. And along with that acceptance letter came an invitation for an IEP, which introduced my parents to speech therapy. They had no idea that this support even existed. And upon arriving to their first meeting, these young parents were scared out of their mind and intimidated, sitting in a room of all professionals. They, just like you and I, had no idea what to expect. But they signed on that dotted line, and because of them, I didn't just do speech therapy. I lived speech therapy, not 2 times a week, but every single day of the week. And by 4th grade, I was down to 3 times a week. And by 5th grade, I was really tired of missing art and gym, so I signed myself out of speech therapy. My dedicated mom during that time, she ended up working as a playground aide just to keep an eye on me, to make sure that I was interacting and making friends. Everyone had my back. I excelled at Central Elementary School, and I was respected by staff, my peers, and I had made some really great friends. I was in Girl Scouts and gymnastics, and I was having the time of my life. I was fearless, fun, and even considered a leader. And I do have one little story about some assistive technology. So back in the day, they were trying to get me to use some augmentative communication, and they gave me the giant headsets that kind of ran through my shirt and connected to my pants like a huge Walkman, right? And so I kept telling them I didn't need this, I looked funny, and I didn't want to wear it. So one day, I was in the bathroom trying to finagle all the wires that went to this complicated device, and I looked at the toilet, and I looked at my device, and I thought, oh boy, if I drop this in the toilet, they might not make me wear this anymore. And needless to say, that day I did not drop it in the toilet, but I went home, advocated for myself, and did not have to wear the device anymore. But each year, as a new grade and a new teacher approached, my parents tell me they got nervous.
Would you be able to keep up? Would your teachers hold you back? Would you be okay with the friends and teachers you wanted to be with?
There wasn't much bullying that occurred at this phase of life, and really it was just jabs, more so from parents. And actually my parents kept this so hidden from me that I just recently found out about them. But some things that happened in elementary school, I wasn't invited to birthday parties or sleepovers because the other parents, they didn't know how to take care of me or my hearing aid. And my mom would tell them and convince them that I was completely independent. But that didn't matter. Regardless of the annoyance and heartache that they must have felt, not once did they ever waver in their words and actions that led me to believe that I was a
strong, confident, fearless, appreciated, well-liked, typical, and a very much loved little girl.
So there's my dad and me. That's where I learned trust and confidence. And the good news is, in elementary school, I proved to all of my teachers, coaches, and friends that I was just that. I would say in elementary school, I definitely persevered. In fact, I ended 5th grade with a bang, ready to conquer junior high school with my friends. I was popular, and I fit in with a large group, and I felt, just like the top photo, invincible. And then the unthinkable happened. My dad was offered a promotion, and in the blink of an eye, we packed up and moved to the historical part of the country, Virginia. It was a depressing time for me, not only because I was dealing with typical teenager issues, trying to figure out my purpose, who I was in life, worrying about what others thought of me, fitting in, and creating a general sense of belonging. I had to start over in a new town with already well-established friendships. Added whammy, they had never met a hard of hearing individual before. So basically, I had to convince peers and teachers that I was capable and worthy all over again. All while battling the negative side of kids that they have at this age. And they're bigger, and they're meaner, and they get quite a rise out of bullying. So let's talk about bullying for a moment. Today I want to give you some specific examples of my bullying experiences because I think it's important to know that these incidences are what have shaped who I am today. But with that also comes the acknowledgement that bullying is a problem for all schools and all students, regardless of being deaf or hard of hearing, and that the schools are working endlessly to study this and enhance school climate. And some of the knowledge you're going to gain here today will help teach you how to prevent your loved ones from being targets. So what did bullying look like for me at the junior high level? Not once did these students ask about my hearing aid, but they were the first ones to criticize my speech or what I wore in my ears. I would say at the junior high level, bullying was more physical. One example I recall took place in the hallways and at gym. Kids would walk by, and just when the teachers were not looking, they'd give you a little nudge, just to see your reaction. And then they'd quickly blame that nudge right back on you, appearing as though they had a reason to kind of push you back. And they would say horrible things like, "I don't like your face. You talk funny." Or on the bus, they would come up to me and they would give me certain words to repeat. Words that they knew that I couldn't say very well, like the CH in Chuck E. Cheese. And when I said those words, they would run off laughing. But if I ignored them, they'd push and jab even harder. So I just went along with the taunting. I tried so hard to dodge conflict. And in junior high, I kept to myself.
All I wanted was for you to be happy accepted, have friends, get good grades, and have the respect of your teachers. But when I went to pick you up at the middle school, you were alone waiting for me. There were tears ready to flow from our always happy girl. My heart cried for you that day, and I think that's when I realized life is not so fair. To see your children unhappy pulls your heartstrings out one by one.
I never told my parents about those incidences, not until recently, because I knew that those things were not true about me. And I knew this because my parents never wavered in their words and actions that led me to believe that I was a strong, confident, fearless, appreciated, well-liked, typical, and very much loved little girl. They treated me as a normal child and never once let me believe otherwise in my mind. And despite these experiences, I kept on because I knew my mom and dad's words were right. They would tell me that I was beautiful, smart, talented, capable, and funny. They would tell me I was tough. In fact, my dad had a phrase he invented for me every time I cried. He would cross his legs and he'd make like a little chair with one of his legs, and he'd prop me up there, and with one hand tightly around my shoulder and the other one squeezing my knee, he'd make me look at him in the eye and repeat after him, "You are tougher than a rusty nail." And he wouldn't let me go until I could confidently, without crying, wholeheartedly and meaningfully repeat that phrase back to him. I am tougher than a rusty nail. Self-affirmation, folks, it's the buzzword these days, but guess what? My daddy and I have been doing this for years. Self-affirmation is the recognition and assertion of the existence and value of one individual self, recognizing and asserting you're valuable. You are what you say you are, and you will become what you believe you are. And yes, I believed I was tougher than a rusty nail. And there was nothing, no experience, no person, no obstacle that would stop me from achieving my dreams. My daddy, he knew what he was doing. And for the record, last night he may or may not have had me repeat this phrase back to him at about 9 o'clock when I was a little bit nervous about delivering this keynote in the morning. My mom, whenever an incident like this would pop up, she would remind me of her love for me, that she would do everything in her power to reassure me that there was nobody in this world that loved me more than her. That the four of us in our family, my mom, dad, brother, and I, that we are inseparable. And despite the mean people out there in the world, the four of us would always be bonded by our blood, family. My mom instilled in me the comfort and beauty and endless love that a solid family can have. And when nothing was right in the world, we didn't need anything else but our eternal love and support for each other. And this would always prevail. This was reassuring. I was tough and I was loved. In middle school in Virginia, I pushed on through those difficult, dark days and eventually created a teeny tiny small group of 2 friends that accepted me. One was kind of in the not so cool crowd, and the other one was really cool, and I would hang out with her in hopes that her and her cool friends would start to embrace me. In time, I also found basketball. The sport of basketball embodies teamwork, competition, determination, strength, practice, commitment, and of course, teammates. I found confidence
in this sport, and I had found teammates after fighting alone for 3 very dark years. I had just started to create a new life for myself and was really excelling. I had tried out for the 8th grade basketball team. I actually made it all the way to final cut, and the coach was still indecisive on whether I was good enough for this team. So he invited me and the other gal back to practice for the whole week. I played my heart out, and that Friday afternoon, he called us into his office, and he informed me that I did not make the cut. Remember when I spoke about the Board of Education, who said I wasn't good enough, that I didn't fit in? And remember how I told you that protecting your loved ones with disabilities is so critical? Because if you hear those words just once, those words come back to haunt you. And all I could think about were those adults telling me that I wasn't good enough. And now this coach was telling me I wasn't good enough. And is it because of my disability, because I couldn't hear? And in any instance like that, I would second guess myself. Well, that afternoon, me and this other gal, we loaded up in the car. My mom was there to pick me up, and she could tell right by looking at my face that something wasn't right. And I held back those tears all the way through the commute. And the minute that the door closed and my friend got out, I cried. I let out that hyperventilating sob cry. And my mom, she didn't say a word. She drove me around for hours on end, and she parked, and she held my hand, and she drove some more until I was ready to go home that evening. My mom was always my biggest fan. Well, guess what? That cut, that quit, I could have done that, but instead it's what turned me into a champion. So I practiced the next 365 days. When I was on a bicycle, I dribbled a basketball, and every night after dinner, I shot 100 free throws. I learned the value of hard work and determination, because that following year, in our finals, who was now the freshman basketball coach, came up to me after that game, and he said, "Wow, I made a decision I regretted last year. I should have picked you." And that was the moment that I knew that everything was in my power. I was in control of my destiny, and I had shown him what I was capable of. And so he offered me a trip to summer camp, and he guaranteed me a spot on the freshman basketball team. I had also started hanging out with this nice young man, and things were finally falling into place for me. And my parents dropped another ball on me. They said, "Your dad has lost his job, and we need to move." Oh boy. This time I was just plain mad, and I let my parents know this. Well, not in my words, because what high schooler talks to their parents, but I let them know my opinion about this through all of my actions. So when we moved back to Nebraska, where they were from, so that they could be with their family, their parents, everything that they told me not to do, I did it. The first thing I started doing was dating a senior as a freshman, and basically became an out of control, angry, push my limits, have no rules kind of girl. I did all of this for 2 reasons. 1, because they had made me reintegrate all over again. And 2, I had made a lot of decisions that I probably could take back now in high school for boys. There was a motive behind these bad decisions. I wanted so badly for a boy to love me. And if I had a sidekick, a friend, a boy that was always there to protect me, I wouldn't have to try to fit into groups, socialize, or make friends. And I thought this was an easy solution. So needless to say, throughout the next 4 years of high school, my parents and I butted heads horribly. So a little bit about bullying at the high school level. It was a little less physical than junior high, and it was done more through words and actions. I had to continually prove myself. So my freshman year, I tried out for the dance team, and of course had to work extra hard to earn my spot. And at tryouts, my hearing aid had flipped over my ear, and I paused briefly to fix it. And in that pause, I became out of sync with the rest of the girls, which cost me my spot. I learned the value of what can happen in 365 days, and I worked my tail off. My mom hired a private dance choreographer and instructor, and we practiced day in and day out in my living room. And guess what? I did make the team my sophomore year. And I had also entered high school, remember this, as the top-notch point guard for basketball. But as time progressed, I had moved to a small community, and this particular coach didn't think I could hear well enough to listen to his plays that he had called. And basically, because of my hearing loss, I lost my spot. And I had to fight to prove not only that I was a skilled player, but that my disability didn't interfere with the sport either. I remember one game sitting on the bench that I didn't get to play, and I looked up at my dad with those big crocodile tears of confusion. And my dad's face got red, and he started marching down those bleacher steps, walked up to that coach, and they shook some fingers and exchanged some words. It was the first time in my life that I had ever seen my dad publicly go to bat for me. I was like, "Go, Dad!" I experienced a range of emotions, though. When he was interacting with that coach, I was scared for him. Yet I was excited because he had my back. But I was also sad, and for the first time, even guilty. I had wondered if all of this was my fault. That if my dad didn't have me, this situation wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have put him in that predicament. While I was internally proud, I experienced a whole new level of guilt seeing my dad this way. Because after all, for 16 years, they had kept everything hidden from me. All of their battles and fears were fought behind the scenes. I knew nothing about the deep, dark conversation that occurred between two parents at night after I went to bed. While proving my worth on the court, I was also busy proving my worth off the court, fighting for credibility in high school. Students would openly tell jokes during class about me not being able to hear, and all I could do was pretend that it didn't bother me. And sometimes I'd laugh along, even creating the joke myself. And what I've learned is, as adults, we are comfortable and confident enough to say, you know what, I have a hearing loss, and I do much better if you would just look at me when you spoke. And there is a level of acceptance when you initiate that conversation. Well, in high school, you're not quite at that level of acceptance, but I found that if I laughed along and created my own joke, it was like kind of accepting that and going along with it and not showing that this bothered me at all. So some of the things that they would do is they would cover their mouths when they spoke to me, and if I couldn't understand what they were saying, they would get kind of a rise out of that and mimic me if I didn't understand them. Or if I misheard a word, they would just simply laugh instead of helping me along. All this time, I didn't even know that my disability was the problem. I thought it was just a part of life, and I really didn't see things any other way. It wasn't until I was an adult and kind of reflecting on my life that I realized who I was becoming was a direct result of the last 6,205 days. Each day was a new layer that contributed to the development of my character, resilience, perseverance, and determination. And again, through whatever ordeals I encountered, my parents never wavered in their words and actions that led me to believe that I was a strong, confident, fearless, appreciated, well-liked, typical, and a very much loved little girl. And then there's college. Each phase of my life seemed to have its own story. So my parents tried to talk me into attending a university very close to home. But I begged them, no, please let me follow my brother. So why was I so adamant on following him? I mean, for the past 8 years prior to that, I had begged every single teacher and my parents not to compare me to him. He was brilliant, he was smart, and he could read, and everything came easy for him. In fact, he often made me angry because of how simple it seemed. Learning and listening was so easy for him. He was smart, he was a straight-A student with an incredible music talent, and he never broke any rules. He was the perfect child. I was the angry, rebellious child. So why now? Why now did I need him? I wasn't sure I could handle one more move, one more attempt at trying to fit in. And I knew if I just followed him to college that I would immediately become Josh's little sister. And the rest would just fall into place, since he had done all the legwork already making friends. I knew if he was accepted that I would be too. And I did follow Josh to college, and I excelled. I was a #1 golfer and captain of the cheerleading squad and on the dance team. And remember, it was just a few years earlier that I didn't make the dance team at all and had to work my tail off. And even a few years prior to that, I couldn't even talk. I was a fighter. So with the decision to follow my brother, I felt even more comfortable enough to explore the use of assistive technology. My mom had arranged for a visit from vocational rehabilitation, where I was first introduced to vibrating alarm clocks, devices that would flash when someone would knock on the dorm door, and assistive listening devices, and flashing telephones. I even found out supporting resources such as clothing for employment and money towards textbooks were also granted. I wasn't sure what I thought about the devices, but I was extremely thankful for the monetary support to help me achieve my goals. But upon leaving that vocational rehabilitation meeting, I did choose 2 things that day. I chose the alarm clock because I didn't want to wake up the whole floor with my super loud clock radio. And I also chose the light up doorbell so that I would know when people were knocking on our door. So were my doormates receptive of these items? Some days yes, and some days no. For starters, my college roommate was incredibly understanding and supportive of my hearing loss and had no issues hanging the flashing doorbell inside of the dorm door. I distinctly remember warming up that sticky yellow putty and somewhat proudly hanging this up, knowing it was going to help me fit in. And it was a device that nobody would ever have to know about. Well, how did that turn out? Unfortunately, we discovered that every single time a dorm door would close, it was enough of a knocking sound to activate it. So pretty soon we were woken up at all hours of the night with this flashing strobe. And in hindsight, we probably should have had a dance party, but we just opted to take it down. Now, the alarm clock, that came in handy. It was a simple, normal-looking clock with this gigantic hidden vibrator. Again, that nobody would have to know about this massively strong disc that was safely tucked away inside of my pillowcase. Until you leave for the weekend and you forget to turn your alarm off. And so my alarm had buzzed for 48 hours straight, and it had worked its way out of the pillowcase onto the floor, the hollow floor, where it sounded like an obnoxious snare drum. And needless to say, I did eventually switch to the beautiful sunrise, slow-paced light-up clock.
When we set you free, we had only hoped now that you would make your own decisions and hope they were wise. It was not sad for us. This was your future that we'd always dreamed of for you, and you proved to us that you were smart, trustworthy, and I knew the difference between right and wrong. You told me it was easy for you to make the right decisions because you only had to ask yourself, would Mom and Dad approve?
As I continued on with my college experiences, I had decided I was committed to 2 goals in life. One was helping children with disabilities, and 2 was still finding someone that would love me so that I could raise my own beautiful family. And I knew that with both of these things in place, that my world as a person with a disability would be a thing of the past. I was ready to be done, to be accepted for who I was, to be loved by my beautiful family, children, and not have to fight to prove my self-worth anymore. And that's almost what happened. So how in the world did I get from Hastings College in Nebraska to Northern Michigan? Well, remember how finding that special someone who would love me was a goal? Well, when I was at Hastings College, I was excelling at athletics and dance, but I was still searching for love and of course made more decisions that my parents did not approve of, ones that could not be undone. Meanwhile, for the past 8 years, I had kept in touch with my childhood crush from that elementary school in Okemos, and he had come from a well-off, well-known family, and through our handwritten letters, he had declared his love for me, and we even met up a few times when I was in college, and I knew he was the one. So it was my turn to drop the ball on my parents. As I prepared to enter my 3rd year of college, I let them know. I am moving back to Michigan, I said, for a boy. Oh, and to become an occupational therapist. But after all, this decision would combine all of my dreams into one. So here I am, you guys, raising a family in Northern Michigan on my own. My parents still live in Nebraska. And there isn't a day that I don't ask them, why in the world did you let me go? And both of them simultaneously respond, we had to. You were going no matter what. And together, we folded my favorite clothes, blankets, packed my photograph, and stuffed animals. My mom loaded me with snacks, and they were prepared to send me away in my tiny maroon SUV. And our final night there, we had a huge family wedding, and I got to say all of my goodbyes. And the next morning, bright and early, right in front of the hotel entryway, I gave my parents one final hug. I was on my way to fulfill my dreams. And as my car drove out of sight, I watched 2 loving parents embrace each other in tears. This was by far the hardest possible thing they could have ever done. But deep down, they knew they were right. And I was one step closer to my dreams. And as I traveled the roads that day and was ready to book my hotel for the evening, it kind of dawned on us, who was going to keep me safe? Was I going to be able to hear the smoke alarms, or was somebody going to rescue me if there was a fire? So we talked about it, and we knew that a service dog was in my future.
One of the saddest moments of my life was standing at a Holiday Inn as Jamie drove away in her little RAV4, packed to the gills as she headed towards Michigan all alone. It makes you question everything you do as a parent, and we hoped and prayed that we had done everything to the best we could. I'll never forget that moment.
That night, they wondered, how I would do in a hotel alone, how I would hear the fire alarms go off, and if someone would save me. And it was then that we realized a hearing dog was in my future. In just 2 years from what was the hardest departure of my life so far, I had fulfilled one of my 2 dreams.
One of the proudest moments came as we sat in the audience and watched you accept your Doctor of Occupational Therapy degree from Creighton University, and then dedicating your life and career to working with children who have disabilities.
And here I am, Dr. Jamie McClintic. You would have never ever known what happened between 1978 and 2018 because my parents never wavered in their words and actions that led me to believe that I was a strong, confident, fearless, appreciated, well-liked, typical, and very much loved little girl. I never stopped believing that I was normal, capable, and perfect, that I wouldn't achieve anything I set my mind to accomplish, and these beliefs are 100% attributed to those young, clueless parents of mine. And my mom, look at her eyes. I have worked for years on her selfies, and she still blinks right when I hit the button. And my dad?
All I know now is that we made it work, and that we had to make it work. And although we were afraid, we could never let you see that.
My parents had almost made me naive, that I was almost unaware that anything was wrong with me and unaware that there was a cruel world out there. They had done such a good job of protecting me. And I had met one goal, which was to graduate with a good job, and now I could afford a service dog. So here I was in 2006, launching a successful career. I had bought my own house by this time, and so I had finally saved enough money for my service dog. His name was Copper Dream. This dog was my everything. He was an extension of my body. I spent every waking hour looking at his ears and watching his responses. I had invested hours and hours in his training before he became certified. I was even kicked out of Walmart during one of my training sessions. But Copper was my alarm clock, doorbell, guard dog, workout buddy, and my best friend. At least until my husband came along. Things were finally falling into place for me. In 2003, I was set up on a blind date, and I had spent the weekend at a cottage with some friends where I met my soon-to-be husband, Scott. And on our second date, he had bought an orange rope ball for Copper and showed up on my doorstep with that ball. And that's when I knew Scott was a keeper, and I snagged him up right away. And I fell deeply in love with this man. He was patient, kind, and loving. And remember, my goal was to find someone that would love me and accept me for everything I was. And he's going to get really mad at me for sharing this, but Scott hadn't really dated very many people at this point in his life, so when I came along, he was like, yes, and vice versa. Look at my face. When he came along, I was thrilled to have this man. We were truly a perfect match for each other. You see that little thing behind my ear? He had no idea when he was marrying me, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, that there were years of baggage that came with that tiny earpiece, taunting and fighting and proving my credibility and my worth. What was important to me was that Scott accepted who I was, and he did not let my hearing aid get in the way of life, of us. And you know, he sure does love me, because the poor guy has to wake up at 4:30 a.m. every single day to that same sunrise alarm clock that I bought years ago. Will I embrace each morning? See, it used to be like hard rock, loud stereo, and then it was the vibrator, and now it is the sunrise. And I calmly and gently wake up. And I look over, and Scott's got the blankets pulled up as high as they can go, and he's got his head buried underneath his pillow. He sure does love me. In all seriousness, though, disability, as I knew it in my earlier days, were forever gone. Just as I had worked endlessly throughout the past 35 years for. And that's why the birth of our daughter was so traumatic for me. I thought I had finally reached my peak, where dreams were coming true. And then wham! Everything that I had ever worked for to erase disability from my life was basically history repeating itself. I wasn't sure if I had it in me to sit in front of that school board again, to fight, to attend more IEPs, to be her crying shoulder, face the bullies, you name it. I was totally not prepared to do this. All over again. So I get it. I get you. I know your every heartbeat, your fears, your anxiety, your hopes, and your dreams. There is nobody in this room that understands where you are better than me. I come to you today as a person with a disability, raising a person with a disability. Whew. This could quite possibly be one of the hardest jobs a human being can encounter. So today, I not only want to tell you my story, but to teach you how to empower your child so that he or she can someday have the confidence to proudly put their disability in the spotlight just as I have. And who is the real hero in this story? Many people want to believe it's me. It is absolutely not me. I may have persevered, but by no means could I have done this on my own. Who were the people that kept me safe? Who wiped every single tear for my last 39 years? In fact, who still gets the first phone call when things go bad? My mom and my dad. They are number 1 and number 2 on my telephone contacts. They understand my every feeling before I even say them. And all I have to do is dial. And if there's longer than a 2-second pause after they say hello, they know. And as I begin to have my meltdown, my mom, she knows. She even knows most of the time what it's related to. And she'll pause for a bit. And she reminds me that she's there. And that I can talk when I'm ready. Except I never really get ready. I continue to sob and hyperventilate until she starts asking me questions. She starts off with, "Are you safe? Are you hurt? And are you okay?" And once she gets the big questions out, I'm usually about ready to talk. And I sob, "Yes, I'm okay. I'm safe." I am now 14,448 days into my journey, and continue to understand and develop my character, resilience, perseverance, and determination. But I have realized solid development means absolutely nothing without having a strong foundation to build it on. You see, it doesn't matter how strong I become, how resilient I am, because when I am faced with a challenge, if I don't have a strong foundation underneath me, I will crack and tumble and shatter. For 39 years, I have leaned on my mom and dad. They are the ones in the trenches, in the coal mine, making sure that I had the tools I needed to conquer each day, whether it was a bully, a difficult homework assignment, or a cut from the sports team. Their reactions to my actions are what built my character, resilience, perseverance, and determination. I would not be who I am without them. And then there's my dad.
We didn't make you who you are. You did that. We just tried to give you the knowledge so you could be the best you could be.
I disagree. This is about the only thing that my dad and I disagree on these days. I say it's him, he says it's me. But take a look at my smile in this photo. This was the moment that I put disability behind me. I had found the love of my life. Everything I had worked for. I had a career and I had gotten married. Disability was a thing of my past, and you can see how happy I am.
You no doubt had to suffer through whatever comes with growing up being different. But thank God you had this inner strength. Or maybe it came from the hearing loss, we'll never know. But it is as much a part of you as your arms and legs.
I want to talk to you about reaction to action. My parents were the reaction to every one of my actions. You see, every one of you out in the audience today, you are the reaction. And let's define that. Okay, so here's a secret side chemistry note. I failed chemistry in high school and in college several times. The only time I actually ended up passing it was through an independent study. I am not a chemist. But I want to talk to you about two different words. One is reaction and one is domino effect. A reaction is a person's ability to respond physically and mentally to external stimuli. And domino effect is the cumulative effect produced when one reaction sets off a chain of reactions. You as the caretaker need to do more than just be a few reactions in your child's lifetime. You need to be a series of reactions, and this can happen every single day of your lives. And if you fall short, that's okay. Take a breather, if it's for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, but dust off and keep on going. Because those dominoes that you have strategically placed will never stand a chance at making it to the very end if you quit. You cannot have transformation without a reaction. And after all of those delicate, strategically placed dominoes fall, there's usually a beautiful, intricate design that remains, right? You see this beautiful, intricate design. This is your child. If you want to transform your child and take them from where they are to who they will become, you need to be the never-ending chain reaction to his or her action. And this simply means to try your best and never let your guard down, or let them sense your fear or doubt, and help them to feel worthy, protect them and empower them, and do your very best to give them the tools that will give them confidence in themselves. And in the end, you, mom and dad, aunts and uncles and grandparents and caretakers, you are the real heroes. Your little ones cannot and will not make it in this challenging world without your endless love, advocacy, knowledge, guidance, research, friendship, empathy, and empowerment. That is why we're all in this room together, to gain those skills, to learn and grow together. Your child needs you more than you'll ever know. And even though you're all at various stages of grief and healing and trying to pick up those pieces, and it's okay if you have to pretend. I actually had a counselor along the way, along my own journey, tell me that it is absolutely okay to fake it until I make it. But please do not let your children sense your fear or your doubt. And even though we're all at various stages of this journey, let's try for our children to do the best that we can, no matter what stage we are in. Your little one needs you, and they are looking up into your eyes, begging for your direction. Just as my daughter did in 2010 when she was born. Remember at the very beginning when I mentioned that being a hard of hearing and expecting mother, that this was the first time in my life that I felt this disability was considered a disadvantage? In the end, I really questioned it all. Was this a disadvantage, or was it an advantage that took me 39 years to realize? This little girl who's helping me become myself and find myself, she has her own Facebook page. I never would have imagined. But who I am and who I have become and what I stand for as a confident individual who is hard of hearing is an amazing and especially unique characteristic that can be used to help educate and empower others. And there is no disadvantage about this trait. It is truly an advantage, an edge, and something that not everyone has. And when you get to the point of your life where you can truly embrace, accept, and educate others, then you have truly gained a superpower. I am no longer a turtle hiding in my shell. As my son would now say, I have turtle power. And my mom, she has something to say.
We love you more each day, if that is possible.
So this brings me almost to the end of my keynote, and I want to share one new revelation that occurred actually last night. So I was at the dinner and I was surrounded by people who were signing, and I realized I didn't quite fit in. I was missing a lot because I didn't catch every single sign. And in the hearing world, I miss a lot. Guess what, folks? I'm almost 40 and I still don't fit in. And I'm still searching and looking for my place in this society. But you know what? I am truly confident. I finally come to a point to be able to accept myself and my disability, and I am confident. You see, all of us parents, grandparents, relatives, foster parents, caretakers, aunts and uncles, whatever role you have in raising this deaf or hard of hearing child, we are in the same boat. We are learning how to stay afloat together, and this is why we're here today, to learn about the resources and available support, and know that there are others willing to hold your hand and lead the way. Now I want to end with a little activity to show how connected we are. Let me ask you this. Think about a time that you were scared, nervous, uncertain about your journey, your role, your future, your little one. This can be about any moment in your life. If you have experienced those feelings, I want you to stand up and take a look at what's happening right now. The people across from you, in front of you, and behind you, to your left and right, they are all standing up. This is reassuring. We are in the same boat, staying afloat together. We have to rely on each other.
Now, I want to take this one step farther, and I want you to close your eyes and recall that moment that you were uncomfortable, unsure, scared, or in need. If you can recall the person that you confided in, the one that you went to, that could be your mom, dad, a grandparent, a coach, if you can recall that person, I want you to applaud them. And take a look now. Look at everyone applauding. There are people in the room that are applauding each other, smiling at each other. When you think about that vulnerable time, think about your child. In your child's eyes, the person you are applauding right now, the one radiating in your heart, making you smile, and bringing back feelings of confidence, is you. You want your child to be thinking these same thoughts and applauding you. You are everything to your child. You are that person. You are the solid foundation that he or she will stand firmly and proudly upon. From this day forward, pledge your commitment to never waver in your words and actions that lead your little being to believing that he or she is a strong, confident, fearless, appreciated, well-liked, typical, and very much loved little child. You are the hero of this story. So thank you so much for coming here and dedicating yourself, your Saturday, your lives, your commitment to your children. You are the real hero here. So thank you.